In this video, I'm going to tell you how many people may end up getting returns on Cyberpunk 2077 based on The Witcher and Cyberpunk 2077 creator CD Projekt Red's presentation to investors. Is Cyberpunk the flop of the century? Not really. So Ars Technica, linked to their article in the description, was digging through the financial reports, and although CD Projekt didn't go out and say it, they said for 2020 CD Projekt was going to have a 51 million provision for returns, and based on other information in their report and in their earnings call with stock analysts, that indicates that they could refund up to 1.5 million copies of Cyberpunk 2077. Nevertheless, they have sold 13.7 million copies, which ain't bad. CD Projekt says that they've earned over $560 million US on a $300 million development budget. So they're sitting pretty with Cyberpunk, even if it flopped relative to expectations. And 13.7 million unit sales is not too shabby. But 1.5 million returns, whether that's returns that they have already done or they expect to be doing, is not that great either. So management really promised with the patch 1.2, which came out earlier in the month of April. That was the big landmark. So far, we've heard crickets from the PlayStation Store, which is still not selling digital copies of Cyberpunk 2077. And it's looking like they're not going to do it after this patch, that they're waiting for another catalyst. We don't know what, and it seems like the management team at Cyberpunk doesn't know what either, because they were asked this question about 20 times, and they always answered, well, we'll just continue to patch it. But they only have 100 developers patching it right now out of a staff that averaged over 400 in 2020. So, the next thing is the next gen upgrade. I just find the next gen upgrade concept kind of laughable, since you pretty much can only play Cyberpunk on a next gen system, right? If you're playing on an old Xbox One or PlayStation 4, you're going to have a fairly crappy experience in a lot of cases. But if you're playing on a newer PC, or if you're playing on the PS5 or Xbox Series X, then you're probably doing okay. I personally just finished Act 1, and I haven't had really any issues. I think the graphics are great. The story is great. My expectations for this were so low. I am just blown away at how good and fun this Cyberpunk game really is. Of course, it's not The Witcher 3. It's not even The Witcher 4. But it's a pretty good game, and certainly the best game that I saw since Ghost of Tsushima. So I would say just jump into the game, whether you're on a next-gen system or not. That would be my take. The next-gen upgrade, it's a next-gen game if you're on a next-gen system, and it's probably not going to see huge stability improvements from this point on, because they don't really have the all hands on deck working on it anymore. It seems like they're going to work on the free DLC and the free next gen upgrade, and that's pretty much all the plans that they have for this year, or all the plans they're willing to announce. Maybe there'll be some online features, maybe not. I think a lot of publishers such as Ubisoft have been unpleasantly surprised by their multiplayer flops, such as Marvel Avengers, Ubisoft with Watch Dogs Legion. These online ventures can be real money pits for the developers if nobody ends up playing, and the player numbers on Cyberpunk are not spectacular at this point. They're struggling to maintain their position on the Xbox and Steam charts, for example. And going forward, I really expect more people to be playing Witcher 3 than Cyberpunk 2077, especially with Witcher 3 getting the boost from Season 2 coming out at the end of the year. So if you compare Cyberpunk to Witcher 3, Cyberpunk sold just under 14 million copies in 2020 versus the cumulative lifetime for Witcher 3 was over 30 million. So Witcher is still where most of the money is made by CD Projekt Red, but it does seem like they're averaging about a little over $30 per unit. They've not really discounted the price of Cyberpunk, and I think it's better. I mean, I think it's a good game. I've not seen any super high quality games in this kind of December to present window. Of course, the PlayStation Store removal was an unforced error by the management team because of their shifting the blame onto Sony, and then Sony just saying, you're too small a fish for us to deal with. Obviously, there have been worse games in terms of bugginess than Cyberpunk 2077. Fallout 76 comes to mind, for example. Somehow, exclusively, the Polish developer CD Projekt Red was picked on by the PlayStation Store, but other disasters such as Anthem and Fallout 76 were not. You know, they said in their report that about over half the games were either PC or Stadia. They refused to break out the Stadia percentage. My guess is less than 1%. To Stadia, so 55% to PC, and then the other 45% was divided by Xbox, with a disproportionate compared to the number of Xbox consoles out there sold by Xbox. So, you know, I think it was about 17 for Xbox and 28% for PlayStation, both PS4 and PS5. So obviously they'll get a boost if they go to the store, but, you know, to get those numbers more in line, I don't think just adding the people they lost out from the digital downloads from the PlayStation Store is going to get them to a huge number in the many millions. You know, you would think about 2/3 of those consoles would come from the PlayStation and only about 60% came from them. That's still not a huge drop. Anybody that really wants Cyberpunk and obviously has a disk drive version, so not the digital version of the PS5, can buy the PS4 version, which is stocked in most stores. I went to my Best Buy the other day and they had a big rack for it. So you can definitely get the physical version if you can play physical versions. So I wonder how much of a barrier that really is at this point. It's more just a symbolic thing. And will players continue to join in? I don't know. I hope so. I think Cyberpunk's a great game compared to what's out there. Would I like a Witcher 4 better? Yes, I would. But we'll take what we can get. So I listened to the whole call with the upper management of CD Projekt Red, and the analysts asked them about their employees and how they expect that to go. And they hinted that they expect about 20% of their employees to leave from the peak in 2020. So they had a kind of surge of employees going into Cyberpunk, and they said there were, even though here it says the average employment in 2020 was 406, and they hired on net 124 new employees, which was up from 32 the previous year. So their hiring is really slow. You know, if you think that they're growing gangbusters, no, they're not. And that's been my gripe about CD Projekt Red, is that because they've adopted this one studio model, which they're kind of moving away from, but not much, with their Vancouver studio that they just purchased. They're just not big enough to manage two franchises, right? Two AAA franchises, and then come out with a game more than once every 4 years in terms of a AAA game. I know they've come out with, some Gwent games and stuff like that, but those are definitely not AAA. And so they said at their peak of actual employees about 500, although of course there were 5,000 employees. That is 5,000 people, not employees, but contractors, probably like actors, things like that. They have to do voiceover in 9 different languages or something like that. So that's going to multiply the number of people that actually work on Cyberpunk, but the actual core developers were more looking like at 406, and of course not all of those were put to Cyberpunk, and 302 in 2019, right? And they're saying at their peak they had about 500. They said 1/5 of those are still actively working on patching Cyberpunk after patch 1.21. So their big patch was 1.2. They're saying that they have actually reduced the number of people working on Cyberpunk, at least the patching of it, to just 100. So my question is, like, what are those other people doing? They can't be all working on Gwent, and they can't all be part of Spacco and doing the Monster Slayer stuff. So what are they actually doing is kind of the big question to me. My hope that they're, working on the next Witcher game, but that's not what they said. They said in their previous presentation prior to this, the annual report release, they said that, but right after 1.2 was released for Cyberpunk, they said that they don't plan to do joint development of Cyberpunk and The Witcher 4, for lack of a better name, because until 2022, and I definitely don't believe they're going to be ahead of schedule on anything. Subscribe to the Linus Wilson channel, where we give you the secrets to crush Cyberpunk 2077 and The Witcher 3.